Oh,
Okay, Madam Mayor, it's 6:05 and we are live.
thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the City of Lake Worth Beach Utility City Commission meeting of May 30th, 2023. May we have the roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor Betty Resch,
Here.
Vice Mayor Christopher McVoy has not arrived yet. Commissioner Sarah Maliga,
Present.
Commissioner Kimberly Stokes. It was my understanding she would be joining by Zoom.
I believe she's not able to join us.
Okay, and Commissioner Reynaldo Diaz.
Here.
Great, thank you. Are there any additions, deletions, or reordering? Having here none, let's have.
I'm sorry, do we want to do the pledge first?
I was just going to say that. Now let's do the pledge. By Commissioner Malega. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Whoops. Thank you. Is there an agenda item on Murray Hills that Chris?
Yeah, it should be under public participation because, oh wait, let me see, is that the consent item? No, that's not. Murray Hills is new business A.
Okay, okay. Perfect. It's always helpful if I get that. Great. Okay, so we have presentations for the Electric Utility Advisory Board update. Do we have an update? I see someone coming forward. Good evening. If you could speak, make sure the mic's on and speak right into it so the folks at home can hear you.
Is that better?
Yeah, and please speak directly into the mic.
Yeah, all right.
Hey.
I'm Matt Portilla, Electric Utility Advisory Board, District 1 appointee, and I'm here to do a annual update, I guess.
Thank you.
So we've gone through a few things. The most recent one was SELF, the Solar Energy Loan Fund. I apologize. It's a really interesting program. I believe that anyone can go to the website SELF, which is Solar Energy Loan Fund at .org. Excuse me. It's fully chartered, first bank in the country, green bank that received DOE funding, community development and sustainable property improvement. So basically it empowers underserved communities. It focuses on low and middle income for lending on certain programs, which is green home loans, landlord loans, and affordable housing development loans. They do a couple things. If you are interested, you can go to that website, like I said, and they have some efficiency and energy conservation loans that they can provide. All these are pretty low rates as well. Resiliency loans for impact windows, also solar, EV, EVSE connections, battery, and disability accessibility improvement.
Is there, this is a question for
Sure.
the city manager, is on our website, is there a link? I think there is, does SELF appear on our website as
So I believe it's being funded and we're bringing in a self administrator to
Yeah.
administrate the program. I don't know when the launch is. I don't know that it's in the upcoming budget, I believe, is
Yeah.
from you guys. So I don't know when the launch is.
I'm just
I
wondering
don't know if
what
it's,
how people will find out about the program,
yeah.
which is
so.
probably on the electric bill as well. All right, thank you.
Madam Mayor, at Liberty Electric
Hi.
Utility Director, there is a link to a self organization on our website. It's been there for quite a while now.
Perfect,
And
thank
it is active and it works.
Okay, I didn't mean to
Thank you.
interrupt you.
No worries. Yeah, I'm glad we have an answer. They also are really interesting, unlike PACE loans. I don't know how familiar you are with that, but they also do the project coordination and make sure that the contractors are affordable and do the job that they say they're going to do. They have a
PACE does not do.
correct. They have a network of contractors that they vet before permitting any kind of loans, which is really nice.
Mhm.
So like I said, there is a project coordinator that's coming to the city to help establish these. I don't know what the timeline is on that, but that is upcoming.
Great.
Recently, the EUAB has not had a quorum, and so I speak on this. It was a consensus of the parties involved
Okay.
in our last presentation. And is there any other questions on the Solar Energy Loan Fund?
I think we're going to be looking for more members if we can reach out to folks to get involved with the electric utility board.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're going to be doing soon, I think we're going to have board well, interviews. Yeah.
Interviews.
Thank you very much. And thank you for serving. Thanks for taking your time.
Thank you. I still have one more
Oh,
that we
please.
had about 3 meetings previous to that one.
Yeah.
That was our most recent meeting. So this is going back a year. And we also reviewed the Horizons Energy Integrated Resource Plan,
Mhm.
which Director Liberty brought the consultants in and pretty much laid out everything. And we had over 3 meetings, kind of did a deep dive into it. So if anyone's interested in what we talked about, it's all on the website as well.
Great.
Do you have any questions on the IRP?
Nope.
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 Okay. Well, that's it.
Well, that's it. Well, thank you very much. And again, thank you for your time, Mr. Diaz.
Just a quick question or suggestion. You don't really have to answer this now, but please, like, you attend these meetings regularly, and if you have any insight or any thoughts on what we can do to boost attendance or get applicants, like, please don't be shy about that.
Okay.
Because I know this is like a
Mhm.
tough one to fill sometimes.
Yeah, and I think there are some constraints on who
Yeah.
can join and also who has availability to appoint. I think one's not Green Acres. Is it Green Acres?
Palm Springs.
Palm Springs, apologize. So
Yeah.
it's there are some constraints there as well.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Presentation by Jason Bailey, who is the Assistant Director of System Operations in the deployment of the new electric outage map and reporting tool. Mr. Bailey.
Hey, good evening. Good evening, Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners, Ms. City Manager. Jason Bailey, Assistant Director of System Operations, local resident and fellow customer Lake Worth Beach Electric Utilities. Before you this evening to provide an update on the Millsoft Phase 1 project. The City Commission gave their approval for this project in July of 2021. While there was some delays on our side internally, we were going through COVID at that time. So there was some delays on our side with the pandemic. Phase 1 is now operational and in service. Millsoft's listening tonight. Just want to say thank you to them. They were very patient with us as we worked through this project. There are 2 items still in progress with Phase 1, the integration into SCADA and the vehicle locator. These items do not hinder the operation or the function of the platform. And we will discuss each of these implemented areas in greater detail in the next slides. So the first part of this was engineering analysis. So with Millsoft, we now have an accurate model of our entire network. And the engineering team has been hard at work importing and updating system values, loading values, and device protection settings. With this information, they will now be able to perform numerous studies in-house in real time that include, but are not limited to, capacitor placement studies for power quality, feeder optimization studies, load balancing and load growth studies, fault analysis, protection device coordination, contingency analysis, transformer loading management, and switching studies to see how the system will behave post-switching. The OMS function of Millsoft, this is our dispatch model. This is actually a snapshot of our model. It's in Windmill. Everybody works off a copy of the master model. And then we use what's called a linked local model. So everybody's using the same map, but there's one master. Everybody publishes their updates, engineering, customer service, us, post our updates to the master. And then those masters push the updates out to the clients. So we're all using the most reliable and up-to-date information available.
So for example, is that a map like where it's red, it's out, when it's blue,
No,
is
this
that
map,
just an
that's
random-
actually color coordinated by voltage. So the red is our 4 kV network. The blue is our 26 kV network.
Oh, okay.
So this is a system one line of our system.
Okay.
We already discussed some of the updates the engineering team is making. The operations team is performing real-time updates as seen in the map. You see on there where there's a temp open and a temp close. They did some switching today in real time, so they updated it on the map. That will update all those customers over to the new circuit. So if there is an outage, they'll know where they go. This automatically updates every customer when they're moved from one circuit to the other. Customer service in the meter shop are constantly updating meter numbers, meter status, account holder, telephone number. All that's imported into the system daily. So this one here is what we're really here for tonight. This is our new outage management map. That's for the public. This was published to the city's website last week, Monday on the 22nd. The communication team will be sending out updates and postings through social media to coincide with the start of hurricane season to promote this map. We have also placed a banner on the old outage website to direct them to this new map because we believe that a lot of people bookmarked the old map directly. This new map also has weather overlays. You can turn the weather on or off. You can change the image from a map to aerial in the background.
I'm sorry, Jason.
Yes, ma'am.
I still only see the first slide. Are the slides not advancing?
They are here.
They are? Okay.
What
Thank
gets
you.
recorded, what we see or what you see? What?
Yeah, on YouTube, I still just see the first slide.
That's unfortunate.
Oh, there we go.
You can see it now.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So on the left-hand side there, there's the map with the little icon over it. If you click that, you can change the aerial background, add the weather to it. On the right-hand side, there's a eye up there for the indication. You click on that, it'll give all the city website links. So link to the website, link to the city's Facebook page, Instagram page, all the direct links are there. Outages will populate on this map within 60 seconds of an outage. They're driven by the AMI electric meters. And originally they'll come in orange. You can see on the right-hand side, there's a toolbar there. It says confirmed is red, orange is predicted, and gray is restored. We'll show you what they look like in later slides. So like I said, it'll drive in the outage to this map within 60 seconds by the AMI electric meter. These refresh times are customizable. We went with 60 seconds because we want to get the information out there as soon as possible. Our neighbor, for example, we went to their website today. They do a 15-minute refresh with a 12-minute delay. So it's 27 minutes to get updated information. But we wanted to get the information out to the consumers as soon as possible. When these outages come in, the system operator will then review these outages, confirm them if they're correct, and dispatch a crew as necessary. So this is one, the outage map on the left screen is a screenshot from an iPhone. So from a mobile device, that's what the map will look like on an iPhone. And that was during the thunderstorm we had last week.
What do those red numbers represent?
So that red box, the 742 in red,
Yeah.
that's 742 customers are impacted in that area.
Okay.
So we had a feeder that locked out, primary wire down right outside the station. So that was 742 customers.
Great.
The 95,
Yep.
those are all in red. Those are confirmed. That was a lateral that also had primary wire down. And then the 18 was confirmed. We had a blown lateral switch. You know, our focus is on the larger outages. So the orange, you see the 12 and the couple of ones, we just hadn't got to those yet. But those are still predicted by the system. Some companies post the predicted. You can turn it on or off.
What's the prediction coming from? Is that
Through the software itself. So the software talks to every single electric meter in our service territory is linked to this map. It's linked to a piece of wire, then it's linked to a transformer, to a switch, to a fuse, to a breaker. And by seeing which ones are out, it'll predict upstream to the most common device.
So let me add a little bit, because I think that's really important, what's happening there. So there's an element of artificial intelligence. So we have a SCADA system, which is looking at the system, our electric distribution system, and we have the AMI system, which is looking strictly at customer meters. The two systems through the software are talking to each other, or the software is interpreting the data, say, hey, if I have all of these devices signaling outage, what is the common denominator to all of them? And that helps us get the crew to the spot where the problem likely occurred. But we also know exactly which customers are out. As we all look up at a pole, we just see wires.
Hmm.
The
Yeah.
system, because we've programmed it correctly, now knows who exactly is on which wire.
Wow.
So just because it's a problem with one wire doesn't mean that everybody fed by that pole has a problem. Only the ones on that particular wire. So we had to rebuild our geographic information system, or GIS, to do that as well, right?
Mhm.
So it's a lot of
Lot of back work.
stuff that's
Mhm.
working.
That's amazing.
So and then what's going to be very key for customers who are in the room, customers who are listening, is that we have your current phone number,
Yeah.
because this will eventually link to an outbound phone call,
Mhm.
or your inbound phone call. It'll recognize exactly who you are, tie that quickly on our screens in customer service to your account, and tell us right away that you have an outage. Better yet, it'll tell you that we know you have an outage,
Right.
so you'll know that it's already being addressed. So either get an outbound call telling you have an outage, or that's coming in the future, or now it'll recognize you immediately and say, we know you have an outage,
Wow.
and would you like an update at this number, right?
You don't get very many no's on what you like an update.
Well, Jason's been handling that, so we'll talk about that.
So like I said, some customers of this software choose not to publish their predicted. We went with the fact that we're just going to go ahead and publish it. We'd rather get the information out there anyway, because this does it automatically in 60 seconds. There's no human interaction. If it predicts it, the worst thing that's going to happen is it's going to over predict. So it's going to show a larger area than what's really out. Okay, at least everybody knows about it, and then we can look at it after the fact and see why it predicted wrong. Because if it predicted wrong, it means something in our model is wrong, and we'll just correct it to move forward. You know, the other thing with this is this model is going to be a living, breathing document. We're going to update this forever. It's going to constantly be updated. The hexagons that you were talking about on the last slide, what the 742 meant. You click it, I have one on the right-hand side there. So that was just for one customer we had today. They had a tree branch in their service wire. That'll give you the additional information of when it started, when it's restored, if there was a partial restoration, and then what the cause was. So with this OMS system, we also got a new IVR system to go along with it. IVR system is in English and in Spanish
And IVR stands for interactive voice
recognition.
recognition.
So if you call our outage number 561-586-1695. Option 1 is report an outage using the automated system. So this system works off the phone number that's on your account. So we need everybody to update their phone numbers.
Excuse me, Jason, you said it's in English and Spanish.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we add Creole to it?
We're working on that.
Thank you.
As part of the communication push through the city's communication department for the hurricane season, we are going to make that a centered part of the media push to get everybody to update their number. We want them to update their number via option 4 of the IVR because they can do it through the system. They don't have to talk to anybody.
Yeah, I also want to ask, that number that you just said, I actually had an issue at my house with electricity. It was my stuff, not the city stuff, but I thought maybe it was. Looking on my iPhone, that number just, I couldn't find it. So I'd like to, maybe I'm just an idiot about that, which could be, but I would like to make sure that that number is really, easy to find when you go on the website, or when you go on, even on the Facebook page. Your website on the iPhone.
We'll review that. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
And then with the IVR too, like Mr. Liberty said, there is you can get a callback where once we restore power, it'll call you back, ask you, is your power been restored? Is there still an issue? And that will re-alert us if there is still an issue. Option 2 on the IVR did not change from the existing IVR. That's for water and sewer emergencies. Option 3 is for licensed electricians. Option 4 is update your phone number.
Oh.
So dial the number, choose option 4. You're going to need your full account number. So if you have your bill handy, it's the easiest way to do it.
It's at 1695.
Yeah, 586-1695. With your bill, without the hyphen, enter your account number, and it'll ask you what phone number you'd like to update. And you can add up to 2 phone numbers. Right now, this process will not be immediate, updating the phone numbers. We pull a report out daily.
Mhm.
Some customer service has to update the numbers manually.
Sure.
Once we complete phase 2 of MillSoft, it will be an instant process. It'll all be done behind the scenes, but for phase 1, it's not. Option 5 is to make a payment, and option 7 is talk to a live operator. Turn this on.
Just so we're clear really quickly, now that we have a second, just to clarify, when you say update their number, it's a communication number, not necessarily the number tied to account, right? Because somebody has like a business that the bill is maybe under their landline, maybe they want their updates by text message on their cell phone.
It would need to be the number they want to communicate
Yeah.
with us with on the account.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So this is phase 1 of the program, the platform. There is 2 phases to it. So phase 2, I'm just going to briefly touch. I don't want to get into great detail. Just want to kind of give a brief overview of phase 2 that will be coming back before the commission for approval. The MillSoft platform is structured in blocks, building blocks, if you will. And phase 1 was the foundation. Now phase 2, we want to build on what we've already done. These items include the CIS platform, which will include a mobile customer portal, work order management, inventory management, financial management like prepay and community solar. Communication improvements will add the ability to do 2-way emails on the account and also 2-way texting on the account. We can text on outages, planned outages, cut lists, balances. We'll be able to do really increased communication. The field solutions portion will include mobile work orders, mobile maps, access to the model while out in the field for planning, staking, and storm response. These are just some of the highlights of the phase 2 of the project. The scope of work meeting for phase 2 was held recently earlier this month, and the team should be getting that together and back before you guys here shortly.
Excuse me, Jason, just for the people who are listening at home. What is the level of security for that two-way communication, right, from once they're at phase 2? So what was the background to make sure that this software that we're using is protecting our customers and their information, their data, to where they won't be hacked or shared with social?
Please.
Somebody, anybody.
No, I just don't want to misspeak from up here.
Great job. For the record, Franco Bolito, former customer service manager, part-time employee of the city of Lake Worth Beach, been working on this project with the rest of the team. So to answer your question, ma'am, the same level of security integrity that all of our vendors have to go through. So just to name a few, SOC 2 compliant, which I think is what you're really concerned about, any data breaches. So they've all passed that, and that's what they do. It's all hosted in the cloud. That's another layer of security that's very important, rather than keeping it here locally on our premise.
This is more of an education for the residents and business owners who are listening.
Yes.
Thank you, Franco.
Yeah, absolutely, my pleasure.
Thanks. Good to see you. Glad you're still sort of with us. Thank you. Okay, now the next one is the electric utility update by Mr. Liberty.
Good evening. Just want to add a few things, not lengthy at all. Like, I know it can be lengthy at times, but just some simple things. First of all, the Electric Utility Advisory Board has done some great work. We have tasked them. We'll be meeting, I believe, next week or the week after. I forget the exact date, might be the 6th. But we're going to start talking about the solar subscription rate or community solar rate. This is a process by which customers, once we start receiving FMPA solar, we'd like to have an option where customers can choose their PCA. Do they want the standard PCA, or they like a PCA that is solar intensive? We want the Electric Utility Advisory Board to weigh in with their thoughts on whether customers would get a percentage, for example. Could they choose 25%, 50%, 75%, 100%, or some other blend of solar in their mix? And then how would the pricing work? How would that work on the bill? How often could they switch between one or the other? Would it be monthly or annually or for 20 years, for example? We don't know. Well, we have some ideas, but we want to get the community's feedback on how they'd like to see these things structured.
Great.
So the goal is to be able to begin offering that early in 2024. So we'll have FMPA Solar 2 begins flowing energy to us at the end of 2023. So we'll actually have inventory, plus of course our own solar farm. So we'll have an inventory of megawatts in our portfolio. And we want to see if customers will actually sign up for a blend. But it's complicated because, as you can imagine, you have to modify the billing system because 28,000 plus customers might want to choose something different.
And that will be more expensive the more we noodle with it, right?
It could be more expensive. It really depends on where natural gas prices are.
No, I mean, in terms of the paperwork of
Oh,
moving.
The administration of it,
Yeah.
yes. And we have to find a way to do this with a new billing system. So part of the things we talk about a new billing in phase 2, it also involves a new billing system that would be able to do this. So how soon would that be available? Which is not going to be in January of 24 entirely, but how much can we do under our existing billing system? So we want to be able to start giving customers these options as early as January of 2024 if possible, or certainly sometime in 2024. So which would be a pretty cool thing to be able to do.
Mhm.
Good news, natural gas prices continue to be low. We're going to be talking more about that in the PCA or rate stabilization fund discussion. We'll have an update on PCA. And for many days, the gas prices have been in the low to mid $2 range, a lot better than the $9, $12, $15 numbers that we saw last year.
Mm.
So the market has recovered. But I always say that some of the underlying elements of that price, that run up in prices, that spike that took place last year, some of those elements are still evident in the marketplace. So we're not out of the woods and may never be. But we have a physical hedge in place now with all the solar that we've contracted for. So that'll begin flowing at the end of this year. The FMPA board did vote unanimously in the affirmative to approve the FMPA Solar 3 project, which was good, as did the executive committee to FMPA. So the project is 99.99% real right now. The one last hurdle is one of the major anchor customers, which is Jacksonville Electric Authority. Their commission meeting to make their final decision is scheduled, I believe, for June 27.
Mm.
We have the date correct. So then that night we will have the last customer all lined up, and then the power purchase agreements and the power sales contracts will be executed in the next few days, and we'll get you the final version for signature. We were able to get the additional megawatts that the commission suggested we try to get. If I remember the number correctly, we went from 30 to 33.35, but those final numbers will be in the documents that we'll get towards the end of June, once JEA signs off. And of course, so far the pricing has not changed, but we've agreed with, assuming JEA does sign, which we expect that they will, that'll allow us to lock the pricing at that number. If JEA was not involved, there would be fewer customers. It could be a higher price, but I don't see that happening. The board doesn't see it happening. We have an understanding from JEA that they will likely approve that. So that's on track and going well. Our timeline, we've virtually achieved, and literally virtually almost achieved every single permit that we needed. My understanding is I need to go on the portal and accept some of the final permit conditions for construction at Canal. So we're hopeful that we start construction. I know David's here. I hope he's nodding yes as I look back.
Yes.
That we'll be doing that we'll have our final permits in hand within the next week or so, and we'll be able to start construction. So we'll probably do a ceremonial a shovel event with just staff, and then of course have the commission out there at the end of construction with a more formal ribbon cutting. But that's probably 6 to 9 months away. That's we've got more time
To completion.
to completion. The important thing now is to get the shovel in the
started.
ground, start get earth turned over and start pouring concrete and setting steel.
Great,
So we'll hopefully kick that off in the next week or two.
great. That's it.
And that's my brief update. We'll go into the
I
agenda.
see light, Mr. Diaz.
I just have a question, but first, instead of a shovel, can we have a giant light switch? That-
That's a great idea.
We could,
Um,
but a ribbon cutting, we could do a giant light. switch.
Yeah. My question is, and I guess it kind of relates to Jason's presentation as well. With all the new map, the meters, all this new technology, and I recently made a report using like our outage report page on our website. Are we at a point where that maybe needs to evolve? Like, because when somebody reports an outage, you already know about it because of the meters and the technology. Does that need to evolve into like a tool of, this pole is breaking or something similar? There's a tree.
Well, they can certainly report a problem.
Yeah.
And that would get our
They can do that
attention.
now.
But, like, we do that
Yeah.
now we'll get a report of a strobing street light and things
Right.
like that. But customers can do that now. And actually, the online reporting tool is very, very fast. That shows up in the control room very quickly as a work order. And the truck is rolled, unless the truck is on another job. They're probably rolling within 30 minutes on that. Look, Chase. They're rolling very quickly.
Right. Well, that's kind of what I mean. Like right now, the options are, there's an outage, my lights aren't working or whatever it may be. Do those choices need to be changed to something,
I want to report some
like,
other problem.
yeah, like a tree or
About,
whatever. Yeah,
tree limb,
exactly.
yeah, we could certainly add those in, yeah.
Okay.
And sort of to follow on that.
Mr. McBoy, let me recognize you so we can keep.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. McBoy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To follow on that, I would assume that our goal is to move us eventually from discouraging people to call and reporting because we have already told them that we know that they have an outage. Because it eats up, people get very frustrated with it when they, are on hold and all that sort of thing. And they don't need to be because our technology is getting pretty close to being able to not preemptively, but proactively let people know.
The goal, I don't think we'll ever get away from a customer calling us, but I think that over time we will condition them to recognize that they don't need to call. And I think that will be important. And we get an amazing number of phone calls. I haven't looked at numbers in the last few months, but it's not unusual to see 6,000, 9,000 phone calls a month. Now they've declined a little bit because we have fewer outages or fewer reasons to call us. And the other thing that's happened is with the use of the IVR, that interactive voice recognition system, it's decreased the number of calls that need to be handled by a live operator. That has done a few things for us. One, it's lowered our cost because an outage call where a live operator takes the call instead of you entering or emailing us, entering it on the phone or it's costing about $2.65 for an outage call and about $5.50 for I have some other kind of problem call. So the more of those things that the IVR handles or you self-handle through the IVR, the more money we save. But the other thing it does is there's fewer people calling. The call wait times are much lower. So our call wait times are now generally in the range of 1 to 2 minutes. It wasn't that long ago. They could be 15 minutes, 30 minutes, very long, and you all would get a lot of complaints. So one of the ways that, one of our leading indicators that we're doing the right thing, I get fewer calls from one of you. Or from Carmen, right? So there's fewer customers calling you. That must mean they're less dissatisfied, right?
Well,
So these things are starting to work. It takes a long time to turn. It's a big ship, and even though we're a small utility, it takes a long time to see. But the technology things that we started 4 and 5 years ago are now starting to show up in results. It takes a lot. We talk about just getting something like MillSoft up and running. We have them have an engineering model. We had to redo the geographic information system. We had to add the software way to train the people, develop the subroutines and the programming. We had to set up the IVRs. We actually have 2 IVRs, one with AT&T, one with MillSoft. We had to stand up the the call center, right? The ENCO call center and have them trained. The next evolution is going to be to try to get to a single screen, which will be the MillSoft screen. Right now, our folks are working in many screens, which involve Naviline and not very intuitive. So it takes longer to process a customer request, which leads to longer wait times. And so the more technology, the more the IVR works, the quicker the screens respond and provide customer information. The sooner we get information to the customer before they call us, the better off we'll be. And then we think the storms, and most people don't think about this, but one of the things you want to know is, let's imagine that there's a storm and you've decided to leave. You're trying to figure out when to come back. You probably don't want to come back until one, it's safe, 2, the power is on in your residence. We need a system that will call you and tell you the power's back on. Or when you call in, we'll give you an update through the IVR so you know when to come back. So these are things that take time to get in place, but things are happening here. You're not, it's like watching the grass grow sometimes, and all of a sudden Jason stands up and gives you an update. Says, wow, we're doing that now. Yes, we are. Things are evolving. But
I have less complaints about outages, I see, I'm on Facebook a lot and I don't see those kind of complaints nearly as much as I did a couple of years ago.
well, reducing the number of outages is a big part of it too. That's
That
one
was
way
a
to
big-
reduce the
that's
phone
what
calls
I
is
mean. Yeah, we've
have fewer outages.
reduced it. You've
Yeah.
reduced it. I haven't
Yeah.
done anything. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now we have public participation of non-agenda items and consent agenda. Madam Clerk, do you have any public comments?
Madam Mayor, I have no public comments for any items tonight
Well, thank you.
submitted on the website.
Okay, and I have none, I have no blue cards here for public participation. So let's move on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Minutes first.
Yeah, all right.
Approval of minutes.
Do I have a motion?
Approval.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. Consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Unfinished business A, rate stabilization fund.
Oh, good evening. So we had an item to bring back to you some more thoughts on the rate stabilization fund. And we do have Craig Shepherd here, and I'm not finding my slides at the moment and what I printed to talk about on that tonight. But we did want to get into a discussion. So what you have in front of you on stabilization fund is intended to be a guide for discussion. And we need some more information. There's my slides. Some more information from you on exactly what you'd like to get into. We do have some slides from Leidos, and just as Anthony walked out, I realized we need to get those slides up. I don't know they're up on the. Maybe Anthony's listening and he'll.
I have no backup.
It's Alfonso who's here tonight.
Alfonso.
Do you want to look on the desktop? Because I spoke to him earlier and I put 3 things from the rate stabilization on in the iDrive.
That's where I have no, in my paper, I have no backup. You have backup? Oh, okay. Okay. Well, we talked about this. We discussed this at some length a couple of weeks ago about establishing a rate stabilization fund and how much did we want? Oh, good. A graph. And this is available online, folks.
Maybe we want to start with this. Let's talk about this.
May I ask Yannick a quick question? Yannick,
Yeah, sure.
in regards to this before we get started?
In regards to this?
Yeah.
Okay. This you asked so nicely.
Thank you. Rate stabilization fund, will it be put into a interest-bearing account?
Yes.
And do we know what we're looking at for that as far as what kind of account, what kind of rate of return?
Well, right now, the last time I checked the interest, I'm sorry, am I supposed to state my name?
Say your name.
Yannick Gendahai, interim finance director. Right now, last time I checked, the rates were about 4%, give or
Okay,
take,
thank you,
4 to 5.
thank you.
Okay. Carry on, Mr. Liberty.
Okay, to walk you through what we have here, we'll start with the background on PCA and where we are today. So the chart on the left shows monthly revenues under the PCA and monthly expenditures and the monthly difference. And the chart on the top right shows the cumulative balance. So you can see, if you look all the way down to row 17, we've had a cumulative revenue of $31.7 million, cumulative expenses of $29 and $40,000, 29 million before. So we have a net at the moment of a positive 2.694, call it 2.7 million. That means that we've collected $2.7 million more in PCA revenues than we've incurred in PCA expenses. It wasn't that long ago that it was the other way around. So if you go back a few months, let's say July and August, you can see that we were significantly in the negatives. But we've now, recovered from the negatives and we're back into the positive. I think these were the charts that in conversation, prior PCA meetings, we arrived at. These are the ones that you'd like to see on a regular basis to have an idea of exactly what's happening. So I know that a number of commissioners were involved. I know Vice Mayor McVoy was directly involved in helping create this template. So I think it's helpful in illustrating what's happening. So in this graph here, we can see how the expenditures were much higher than the blue line, which was the revenue. So initially we were pretty much on top of it. And then gas prices started going up before we adjusted our revenue. So our expenditures went up because gas prices went up, and our revenues, as we had our PCA rate increases in June and September of 22, finally caught up, and we started collecting enough revenue. The expenses came down and the line crossed over. And then you can see that same type of thing happening in the cumulative graph, where now the expenses are cumulatively below the revenues. So we're at the point now where we have if you will, a slight over collection. And I'll go here to the $2.694 million of PCA revenue versus expenses.
So let me ask you a question. Theoretically, if we said we would like to have a $2.5 million account, we have it already.
That's my understanding of how these numbers work. Yes, and we could work with Yannick to basically to do that.
Okay. Mr. McBoy?
I think an important thing for residents and ratepayers to notice between the two graphs is, on first cut, you look at the upper graph and say, oh, cool. Our expenses cross way back at whatever month 10 is. They're just numbered in order. So I don't know. I don't think that's October, but whatever month that was there, we've been overcharging all that time since then. It's important to look at the lower graphs, the cumulative, and remember that, yes, our revenues increased above our expenses, but we were in the hole for a while.
Yeah.
And so the crossover in the cumulative happens a number of months later. So it wasn't like we could have said back at month 10 on that one, hey, we can quit and drop it down. You got to make up the loss. That's
Right.
not immediately obvious unless you think it through.
And while we were in the hole, that doesn't mean that we weren't current with our suppliers. We were current on our bills. We were operating out of our general fund balance. That the line of basically the general fund became like a line of credit and was covering the expense until we caught up with customer revenues. There's always going to be a lag, and I call it a porpoising. And what you should not do, and when you look at these curves and say, wow, we got it wrong. No, we actually got it right. You're always going to be lagging, right? You're going to be either over collecting or under collecting. If you get to a situation where it's absolutely perfect, that's probably not right technically, because there's always a lag. For example, we're paying our bill in the current, very quickly within 15 to 20 days of receiving the bill, but we're not getting the revenues from the customers until they've actually paid their electric bills,
Right.
which is
Right.
could be 30 to 40 days later. So there's always going to be an inherent lag in here. You're always going to be chasing it. But there's many utilities that, for example, do this annually. And you can imagine the mess that we would be in if we were not doing this quarterly. We'd be way behind. We'd be looking at some pretty significant jumps.
Thank you. I just wanted, before I call on anybody, it's the last paragraph, staff is seeking consensus on the minimum and maximum funding, so the amount that we put in it.
Right.
And also a guiding policy for utilization of the fund. Are you looking for that from us tonight?
Yes, we'd like to have a discussion. We'd have Craig Shepard here from Leidos, our race consultants, and will lead us into a series of slides and talk about that
Okay.
and have it narrowed down to what kind of a range you would want. Of course, we also have Yannick, because he would be responsible for the fiscal control documents, if you will, that would set the rules of how we actually move this money around or don't move it around.
Or don't do it. Before we start, Mr. Diaz and Ms. Milligan had Bill Edson.
I guess on that note, I think it's a lot easier to talk about how we're going to use this money, which is, of course,
Which
fine.
we're about to
and-
talk about.
And the other side, I think, is a lot more difficult to calculate, because it's like, do we want to over prepare? That never really sounds like a bad thing. But how, looking at this graph, which is like the table in the graph has been super helpful in laying it out. And you're looking at months 6 through 10, which is May 22nd to September. 2022. Like how, in this, and your experience and, in doing this over the years, how does that rank, these last round, if you will, fuel, lack of stability in fuel prices? How does that rank in terms of like severity and other situations that has happened?
This was very severe with not a lot of precedent, the way this prices launched like that. And I think that there's a lot of, we talked about global events, the war in Europe, again, Ukraine, the Nord Stream pipeline shuts down, the significant increase in LNG exports to China and India and other buyers, the ramp up of LNG terminals, and there are more terminals that'll be coming online in the US in future years. The retirement of coal plants being replaced, not always by solar, but sometimes by cleaner natural gas plants than what was coal before. So a whole bunch of things all happen at the same time. And those elements, basic elements are still there. There's still a war. The Nord Stream pipeline is not returned. There's more LNG terminals opening. And there was a heat wave last summer too in the mid-Atlantic, which drove, power generation needs significantly. So that could all happen again. And then, not wanting for more bad stuff, but if you have a hurricane that heads to the Gulf, that means that drilling stops for that period of time. Production, not necessarily drilling all the time, but production will certainly stop. And then you're living off of inventory. So there's a lot of things that can happen. But the good news as a city, we talk about this over and over again. The more solar that we've bought for our portfolio, the less we will be affected. That doesn't mean we'll have zero effect. Even at the height of it, we'll still have probably 35 to 40% of our power coming from natural gas. But that's a lot better if you're in the 80 or 90% range.
Right, because there's, it's a difficult thing to predict, obviously. And if we use this as the case study, like, do we prepare for another scenario that's just like this? We'll be fairly well prepared because, news on the other side, depending on who you ask, this could be good news or bad news. But for example, like the deal that's going to be voted on by federal government on Wednesday includes things that like fast track some pipelines and whatnot, and that might have a good effect on fuel prices. I think environmentalists disagree with that, but there's a lot, and it's a difficult thing to prepare for.
True. The particular pipeline that's in question is a pipeline in West Virginia that would bring more natural gas to the East Coast. That would certainly have helped last year. It would have helped prevent, I'm not sure 100% of the price spike that we saw, but I would think a significant portion of it. There's a lot of debate, depends on where you are on the issue back and forth, but yes, that will bring more natural gas into the East Coast markets.
Is that fracking gas? Is that
I believe it is.
Ms. Malega?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I, for one, after asking Yannick the question that I asked about what kind of rate of return we're gonna get, I think that from my perspective, 20% with a 3.3 minimum and a 4.3 maximum is a great fund for us to have. It's fiscally responsible. We know that the rates are gonna change on what we're making on the money. We don't know what, like you just said, the future is gonna hold. And I just think that that's a safe investment on our perspective of taking the 20%. And for those who are listening at home, it's 20% of our projected power cost, which is 16.5 million, which will give us a 3.3 targeted balance, which by the time you guys do the math, these are April numbers, we're at the end of May. We're probably already past 3.3 or close to it, right? So I'm looking to the people in the audience, but they're shaking their head yes. So to me, we're already there. We're at the 3.3, max it at 4.3, which is going to be right around the corner by the time we close out books. And that we would have some opportunity to make rate on the money. And we've set ourselves up for a good what if scenario. But I'm comfortable with making a motion to go with the 20% at 3.3 million and a 4.3 maximum. That's my motion.
Do I have a second? Well, are we voting tonight? We're just looking for consensus. I think
Consensus, Madam Mayor.
consensus. Yeah, tonight's consensus.
Okay, that's my thought.
And I'm going to ask Mr. Liberty, that between 3 and 4,
I
is that a good
think-
range for you?
I think that's a very good range. It's a prudent range. It has another benefit as well. So as you get into the budget season, you'll be meeting with Stantec. Stantec will be sitting in these chairs, and you'll be looking at the Stantec models, and you'll be looking at the cash flow models and days cash on hand, working capital, things like that. So when we look at this, let's say, for example, when we look at the fiscal 22 numbers, cash on hand, the negative balance that we were carrying at the end of fiscal 22 is going to hurt our cash on hand calculation. So these negative numbers basically deduct from the cash you have on hand. Will make it look bad. Typically, financial analysts will say the fallback is say your rates are too low because you don't have enough cash on hand.
Mhm.
What in this particular case, I'm not sure it's the PCA rate that was too low, not rates as a whole. So if we keep enough cash, let's say we have $3 to $4 million in a reserve, if you will, set aside for PCA rate stabilization, that will be the same as more cash on hand. So when you see those financial models, they'll look better. What's the other benefit to that? When the next time that as a city, we're getting ready for a borrowing
Mhm.
of some type of bond, that it will look better financially. It's not faking it. We really
We
will
have it,
have that
right.
cash on hand. They want to see they have the cash on hand. So it will show up in those financials when you're going through the budget season, which are the workshops that we'll be seeing in July and August
Yeah,
and
this
into
is
September.
Off topic, but just that whole thing about the minimum cost that we charge, which is so much less than the actual cost. It bugs me. It just really, we're subsidizing everybody. Mr. McVoy, and then we're gonna, I think, have you come up and, yeah.
Well, maybe it's useful for Craig to come up because I was going to ask, could you walk us through the three graphs of adjusted and the three graphs are at 2 million, 3 million, and 4 million
Right.
of stabilization fund. What I was struck by looking at them and surprised by was that the difference between the 2 million and the 3 million graph wasn't really that noticeable. Now, I don't know whether that graph is the best way to visualize what it would have looked like to the customer in terms of lowering the bump on them. So that's why I'd like you to walk us through those. I kind of expected the difference between the graphs to be a little bit bigger, but maybe I haven't interpreted. So
Okay.
Here we go.
Okay.
Introduce yourself. and
Greg,
get started.
Greg Shepard, Leidos Engineering, Orlando, Florida. Yeah, the three graphs are basically a little further analysis into what happens the last go around if you had a $2 million fund or 3 million or a 4 million.
Right.
And we had like monthly withdrawals or deposits into the fund ranging from $500,000 to $1 million a month. And so there's sort of steps, but the 2 million, in any case, you're smoothing out the graph, and the 2 million made an effect. 3 million got a little better. You're right; it wasn't that much different. I guess it started to look better. One thing you notice, the green line is the stabilized fund, and the green line you would have been able to lower than the blue line, which is what you're actually doing. Lower it sooner. And then the $4 million fund looks the best. That's the smooth. But just to point out, like Mr. Liberty said, we think this was an extreme fluctuation in fuel prices. So maybe the 4 million is toward the top end, and we hope we won't have that again. But and also looking at what others have done, we talked last time between 2 and 4 million is for your size would be what others have done. And also remembering that, well, you're going to have 3 to 4 million by the end of May. So it sort of all comes together that maybe the 3 to 4 is good. It's about 20%, 20% of your number. And if it was extreme like last year, the 4 million would have been, really good. So 3 to 4 million, just ranking through the numbers looks very reasonable.
Okay. Thank you. And then let's talk about use of this fund. Is that we're going to talk about as well?
Okay.
We should certainly tee up that discussion. So in generally speaking, if you've collected dollars through the PCA, people tend to keep those somewhat restricted to PCA, right?
Right.
But that you make the rules. You're the commission, you're the policymakers.
Well, there you go.
So I would suggest, of course, that it stay within the utility and be very limited in its application. But we don't have a storm fund, for
Well,
example.
that was my next question.
And small storms are, $1 to $1.5 million. The bigger ones could be 3, 4, 5 million, depending on level of damage. Now, we've done a lot of system hardening, reliability improvement. We've got a lot of newer infrastructure out there, but not 100%. But we could, or you could, give us guidance to include as one of the allowed uses that you would authorize it for storm. But we should also consider whether we have a separate storm fund or not.
Yeah.
Many utilities have a storm fund in addition to a rate stabilization fund, which is aimed more at fuel prices. But you, as commissioners, as the policy board, would have the authority to do what you think with it.
But it would be utility based for something like clearing the streets, cutting trees to clear the streets, things like that.
Typically, the storm costs are
Actually,
incurred. They're actual costs that incurred, but typically mutual aid contractors who come in to do a lot of the restoration, putting the poles back up, reconnecting customers, major vegetation clearing of electric infrastructure,
right.
not necessarily street
Streets,
cleaning.
right, yeah.
Right.
Mr. Diaz had a question or comment?
Yeah, quite a few on that. I think, I'm definitely in the camp of a separate storm fund that focuses on the preparedness cost of getting those out of town guys in town just in case, and then after the fact to clean up, like you said. In terms of rate stabilization fund, of course, within utility, I'm leaning more definitely on PCA related stuff. And I think it's really, really important to get this out to customers that this isn't a fund to lower their monthly bills. I mean, that's always our goal. This is a fund of just in case, things happen. It's a preparedness thing. It's not we're collecting this money so that we can perpetually look for opportunities to lower your bill, which we are doing that separately, but that's not what this fund is.
But for example, like if there's an emergency,
Yeah.
we went through last summer, we don't have to raise your rate.
Exactly. But if things are running average and normal, it's not us an opportunity. Hey, let's dip into the fund because we want to give people a break. And I think that needs to be really explicitly written out.
Okay, thank you. On the other side, I forget who was up first, Mr. McVoy, I think.
I too think that the PCA, the rate stabilization fund and the storm fund should be kept separate for a variety of reasons. I would be okay with the idea that because we had a fairly unusual set of circumstances and we now are in a pretty good situation that we've collected a fair amount, I would not be opposed to taking, when we settle up by, say, the end of May, and we find out that we're somewhere between 3 and 4 available, if everybody agrees, taking a chunk of that, whether it's 500 or $1 million, and saying, hey, on a one-time basis, let's put that into the storm fund. It's not PCA, we understand that, but we also don't have a storm fund. So let's get it started. And then we have a separate discussion of how we're going to fund the storm fund in the future, but we give it a little bit of a head start. What I'm seeing, my thinking for going a little lower on the rate stabilization, my thinking is this, I don't know if it's correct or not, but my thinking is twofold. One, we generally agree that what happened last year was probably a pretty far out on the end type event. Will something like it happen again, particularly the summer thing? Could. The war is still going on, and yet our gas prices are at 2. There's some things that suggest there's some resiliency here, but I totally agree with Director Liberty that some of the underlying things could come back. So we should certainly have this, but maybe we can view that last event as pretty much a quite big outlier. So maybe we can use that argument to go a little smaller on the rate stabilization. The other argument that I would add to that is we are moving to reduce our natural gas exposure. We're definitely moving in the direction of reducing that, which means, and our prices are stable on the solar. So that argues also our exposure is a little bit less for the purpose of the rate stabilization. So that would be my suggestion. Go maybe in the 2.5 to 3 range, something in that order, and set aside a chunk of what we have. I don't know what the right number is, but set outside something to seed the storm fund. Because that we certainly know that we're going to have storms. We don't know when. All the indications are that storms can be expected to be more severe, that's an increasing threat rather than a decreasing.
So are you suggesting making it between 2 and 3 and then taking $1 million out, making it 1 to 2?
No. My prediction is that by the end of May, we're going to have a positive balance of about probably close to 4. I'm thinking somebody can.
Is that the number we're using? Is that accurate?
I'm not sure which number I want to put out there because I have 2 scoops of ice cream betting on and I forget exactly what I bet on the last meeting, but I don't want to double down on the bet and up in for 4. But no, I think
Yeah.
So the thought is if we have about 4, set aside 1 as a weird one-time seed the storm fund, even though we know it's not really PCA, but we've got a little extra, put it in there to get that started, and the rest of it keep for the rate stabilization.
And I have a question to that. If we achieve our, let's say, 3.5 to 4 number that we're talking about that has been discussed, couldn't we then just, that we've got that there, and it sounds like it wasn't too long to get that up. I mean, how long did it take to accumulate 3 million? Few months?
well, we did raise our rates, around 27 or 30 to 28, $29 in total last year to do that per month on 1,000 kilowatt hour customer, which was a big number. But, and then prices fell dramatically. So that's what helped us to
That
recover.
helped us to get that. through.
We're not going to over collect as much in May as we did in March and April because we lowered our rates. Now
Right.
we've had 2 successive rate decreases. So we'll come down, but we also have cash that's still coming in from those periods. Those customers pay, late, for example, we do have cash coming in. So, and at the same time, volumes are going up.
Right.
So I would think we're easily going to get to the 3 million to 3.5 million range.
Okay.
That is my guess of where we're going to land.
Fairly soon.
Right. So you could give us guidance. For example, the vice mayor would put us in that range of 15 to 20%, which would be 2.475 to 3.3. Maybe that's the range that we would land in.
Well,
I think
but
the
then-
point is well made that our reliance on natural gas in the future, beginning in December of this calendar year, will start to go down. And that will continue for the next 3 years or so as successive FMPA community municipal solar projects come online. We'll keep dropping down each year.
You can always change your target,
Sure.
once a year.
Right.
Also, wanted to point out that during the spike in prices, you were actually over 5 million in the hole. So
Wow.
the 4 million wouldn't cover everything. You actually would have needed 5. So, the 3 is sort of
Yeah, I
more
like that
moderate.
higher number, actually.
Yeah.
And
Anyway.
but maybe if it is higher, when we get to that point, start funding the storm thing. Ms. Blago.
School of thought is, when snowbirds leave, we collect less money. So the money that we've been collecting, we're not gonna see in the next 4 to 5 months. So that's one school of thought, that our revenue is gonna go down. So we might be a little over ambitious in what we're saying in numbers. 3 million will net us around $120,000 a year if it stays at 3 million with our return. So $120,000 a year, we could write in that the PCA investment, that money goes into a storm fund. But when we say storm fund, this is a utility meeting.
Right.
So we're talking to the electric, but everybody's got to kick in. So when we talk about the storm fund, it can't just be, in my world, that the electric utility starts funding it.
No,
Hang on, let me finish.
To be clear, I meant an electric storm fund.
Okay, but when we say
Specific
storm
to
fund,
the
when we say storm fund, I think all utilities,
No.
because we have street cleaning, we have, okay.
Those have to be
Yeah.
separate.
Right, so we have to talk about this as a full storm fund for the city of Lake Worth Beach utilities. Not just this is a utilities meeting, not just
Right.
electric. So if we're gonna kick off the storm fund, I believe that each entity, each department should have to kick in the same amount or same percentage to start that fund to be equal, right? But to me, the 3 million to 4 million, I feel comfortable in because of what it's gonna net on return. That money that we make every year could roll into the storm fund and help fund that, not just the residents.
Yeah, small.
That
It's
is a good-
small, but it's something that it's never been done. So if it had been done 5 years ago, we would have been saving on $600,000 in a storm fund.
It is a good point. I hadn't thought about that before, but a portion of the vegetation management costs are distributed to the water side because we need to clear the alleys so we can get to the water meter. So they don't pay for all of vegetation management. A portion of that cost is allocated to the water department. But there is some logic to creating a utility storm fund. The majority of the expenses, though, are, in all fairness, are electric associated with, but not 100%. Obviously, sewer has a big expense during storms, which is clearing the sewers and getting them working again properly for drainage. But we can easily go through $1.5 to $3 million in not that big of a storm in responding with mutual aid. It's a big number.
So could we call it the utility storm fund?
It could become the utility storm fund, and within each one of the two enterprise funds, and Yannick would have to work on the details. There would be an electric storm fund and a water sewer storm fund. But we want to nail that down and build it up over time, and also have some pretty strict rules on how it can be used. So it would have to be multiple layers of approval before we could just say, oh, yeah, take that out of the storm fund.
Okay.
And I think the other thing to be said is once you get to that number, you stop collecting.
Right.
Right.
Or start collecting for the storm fund?
Right.
Just Mr. Diaz and then Ms. Davis.
Did you have a response to that? You want to go first? Oh, okay. So I think you covered a lot of it.
Again.
But I think that, that each utility needs to have their own storm fund, and as you pointed out, electric is going to be much more significant, right? And I'm just as an example, like let's take Dorian for example, and to mobilize all those line people and all the workers and the emergency management, all that stuff. Like and then of course we were spared. What was that bill?
At the risk of being wrong, the number that's stuck in my head, the number that's stuck in my head was around 2.9 million, but I'm not 100.
Right.
I'm not 100% sure that was the number.
Right.
But that's the number that's stuck in my head at the moment.
But
It's giving you an ice cream. cone.
Okay.
It's significant. I know we've talked about this before, and that's why I asked, because it's significant, and that's just for preparedness. We didn't have to send them out into the field.
That's just to get them down
That's
here,
just to
feed
get
them.
them down here and be staged.
Right.
And
That does not include the overtime because we did have outages, but our own crews kept up with it. We didn't have to pull that group in and actually put them to work, but correct.
So the interest on these accounts is I think I agree over time it's going to build up, but we're looking at big bills if these situations happen.
Goes fast.
And I'm going to say this without using the H word, but it doesn't have to raise up to that level of storm to have significant expenses, right? Like we saw what happened to Fort Lauderdale.
Mhm.
That was more of a water management test, it seemed like, but disaster. Yeah, but it was a test on their stormwater management system that they were not prepared for. And it was a year's worth of rain in a matter of hours. And, that's going to test any utility.
Yeah, nobody's going to be prepared for that.
Twice.
Right.
And
But those,
twice in the last month, we've had tornado live sightings in
Right.
Palm Beach County. So fortunately, they did not come here, not a hurricane, but a tornado can certainly be more destructive
Sure.
right.
in some cases than an actual hurricane.
So and the reason why I bring that up is because these are obviously significant bills, and it's going to happen more likely because of climate warming and change and whatnot. And so we need to be better prepared and figure out where we're going to find this money long term to save our pennies in the just in case fund. And so I'd be curious, and maybe if we have consensus on this, I would like to know, or maybe you already know the answer, Craig. What do other what's that policy look like for others in terms of rate stabilization fund and how money can be moved to storm? Because I kind of like the idea of having some kind of, I look at this policy and it's all legal language. There should be an avenue where we either have to vote or find some sort of mechanism to move money over for those circumstances that we can't foresee. And sometimes we're just going to need to find the money somewhere. So if that is a part of this rate stabilization fund where a piece of the policy gives us that avenue or that opportunity, in extreme cases, if we need it, I would be okay with.
That, something like that could certainly be written into the policy to give you the option to do that in the future.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't written, I'm not the
You could always
attorney,
do
now,
it.
but
Yeah.
you could probably come back with a resolution anytime and say, we're going to make an emergency appropriation and move something over. But it probably would make sense for folks that sit in these chairs for decades to come to say, no, there was some thought under the rules of a stabilization fund that under very specific circumstances, you could move money to a storm fund.
Right.
But, and then have a governance process, say, well, who would approve that? Not me, for example, or not whoever sits in this seat, but would that be a city manager decision, or city manager, finance director, and utility director combined make it,
Mhm.
or just city manager? We
Exactly.
need to come up with a process. We can
Yeah.
suggest some things.
Right,
that allow it
exactly.
to
And
happen.
and it needs to be, those parameters need to be, I think, defined and narrowed, maybe not too narrow that, you don't have adequate opportunity, but they need to be pretty well defined because, 10 years down the line, some might think, an emergency situation is something that we wouldn't think to define it as. So I think
Yeah.
we need to,
Well, we'll review the language. I mean, staff will come up with language, I would think. Speaking of staff, Ms. Davis, you're up.
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you. Unfortunately, as you know, Commissioner Stokes could not be present, but she did have a few thoughts that she wanted
Okay.
for me to read into this discussion. And it related to the parameters or thoughts on the stabilization fund policy. The first one, she says, as soon as the account is created, we should transfer the full amount of the over collection we have documented in the spreadsheets. This should be between 2 to 3 million. So I know many of you said a number. She says between $2 to $3 million, which is within the target range. So no additional steps or rate increases should be required for
Right.
building the initial balance. The second thought she has is then transfers in and out of the fund should be done each month, should not require action from the under collection of the PCA charges. The commission and the public should receive a monthly update on the balance of the fund and the backup for each utility meeting. After the first month, we should use a table and a graph that shows the balance for each month so we can see any trends of the fund's balance growing, being spent down, or remaining steady. And then the last thought is, whenever one of the conditions is triggered, such as reaching the minimum or the maximum threshold, that would justify a change in the PCA rate. It should come before the commission, not be adjusted by the electric utility director or city manager as mentioned in the sample in the backup. The commission needs to be provided with enough information about predictions for the future power costs in order to determine how aggressive we need to be in addressing or adjusting the rates up or down.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McBoy. And then what, Madam Clerk, are you keeping an eye on our time with this 30-minute thing?
I am timing everything, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Mr.
A
McBoy?
couple thoughts. One is that I think recalling history in the community, it's very important that we very clearly identify a storm fund, or what do we call it? Storm protection fund, storm something or other fund. Identify them by utility, because one of the things that we have in our city is that I think it's mostly a myth, but perhaps sometimes not, sometimes reality, that the city uses the electric utility as a way to just put some more money in the general fund to fund this, that, and the other. And that's not a good reputation. It's not a good feeling for residents to have. The utility should be providing them electricity, should provide reliability, all those things. So that's one thought. Let's make sure that we very clearly identify a storm fund as that's the electric storm fund. We can have other storm funds, we certainly should, but let's keep them very clearly separated, good firewalls between them. That's thought one. The other thought is, as we think about how much to balance between the rate stabilization fund and the electric storm fund, remember, I think it's very important to remember that they're quite different. The rate stabilization is basically a bank account for residents. It says,
Right?
hey, we don't want to hit you with spiky changes in rates.
Right.
We're not saving you any money. We don't have an ability to do that. We got to pay Orlando for whatever natural gas we burn. We do that. All we can do with the rate stabilization fund is say, hey, the bump from 1 month to the next is going to be not quite so severe. But we're not giving people any money. We're not really providing any service other than, kind of like forcing you to put some money aside to save for your roof, which is a good
Right.
idea.
That's what this
People don't like to do.
is.
A storm fund for the electric is very different. We don't see any of that money back. We know that we're going to have some big time expenses that we got to figure out a way to fund. And you spend that money and, it fixes some things and that's good, or it gives us insurance because it keeps the people here who we need to fix it. But that money doesn't come back. So the two funds have very different natures to them. I think the one that needs to be bigger is the storm one rather than the rate stabilization. The rate stabilization is nice, but it's not necessary. The storm fund is necessary. Got it. And so I would that's where I say, take a little bit of it, throw it in as seed to get the thing going. And then in a separate discussion, we need to come back and figure out how are we going to explain to residents that we need to somehow pay into this fund and make sure that it's got something in it for storms.
Well, we're not raising their rates to do it. We're taking,
Well,
I don't think there's,
one, I suspect that we will have to raise rates to deal with that. I would be my guess, unfortunately. Both because of the size of the amount of money and that you spend it for one storm and it's gone and now you got to build it up again for the next storm.
Ms. Malega?
Thank you, ma'am. So it's funny, we're sitting here talking about this and we're going into budget. I would just like consensus from everybody that we do not take this additional money and use it as part of our revenue generation that now has to contribute to general fund. So while we're going into budget, Mr. Liberty's going to come and say, okay, here's what electric utility made. Whatever goes into this rate stabilization fund needs to come out of that revenue. Because general fund is going to receive 8% of the revenue from electric utility. I would like us to be clear that this stabilization fund needs to be taken out of that revenue before that calculation happens. So we're not
So
running.
don't charge
Yeah,
8% on it.
Correct. Well, we're giving direction. So I would like this stabilization fund, whatever's generated, 3.3, whatever that number is, to come out of the revenue before the 8% is calculated that goes to general fund.
Mhm.
Yannick, are you following me?
Yeah, because it sounds like the rate stabilization fund is generated by the revenue from the collection of
Correct, but
energy
Right.
used, not the revenue from.
that's why I
general
want to
fund.
make sure
So I'm
that it's
y'all-
not, that's why I want to make sure it's not considered revenue.
I mean, we're not gonna have that additional charge to the stabilization fund of 8%. Because that, from what I've seen in the budget, what's been happening over the past years is that 8% is already determined before the budget is adopted. And that's the revenue that's being transferred over to the general fund. So regardless of whether, regardless of how much money we make, that money is already going to be spent, is going to be transferred to the general fund.
But going forward, because we've never had a rate stabilization fund, there
Right.
needs to be an adjustment. Can you turn your microphone off for the feedback? I just want to make sure, because in my world, we shouldn't be considering what goes in and out as part of revenue anyway.
Mhm.
So that's one fight that we've constantly had with finance department is why are we looking at the PCA as a revenue? When it's not, it comes in, it goes out. We don't make money on it.
Correct.
So I just would like to, for the future, since we're doing this, that is no longer considered part of revenue because that's going into stabilization fund. So we're running a year behind.
Right.
Looking forward.
So what we could look at, I don't know if I turned it off. So what we could do is, in the budget, we could reduce that transfer, but whatever we estimate, we're going to be transferring over to the stabilization fund.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I just want, because we're giving direction, that would be part of the direction that I would like to see for the finance.
Correct, because once we pass that budget,
Understood.
we're transferring those funds.
Thank you.
So
Miss-
one way to look at what effectively happens is that we, when we set the budget for the year, let's say we usually wait till about August before we lock in the final PCA number. Let's assume for the moment it's $17 million is what we think we will need. That gets calculated as utility revenue. And then 8% of that, which is a little over $1 million, 1.3 million, goes into our general fund transfer. So our budget includes, we don't mark up the PCA by that amount. Basically then comes out of the utility fund.
Correct, which is why I just asked for that now to no longer be considered part of the revenue, because it's an in and out. It never should have been considered revenue from day one.
As an,
We don't mark it, we don't.
it's hard for me to argue against that as the utility director.
Mr. Diaz?
No.
Oh,
I'm sorry. It's just on that point. I want us to be careful, and I'm of course guided by Yannick on this because I'm not the finance guru, but I want to make sure we look at that very carefully because the 8% is not just used to generate revenue. There's also administrative support from the administrative
Right.
side of the city operation to electric utilities. So
What changing the amount of.
but it's not, it's, to me, it's not black and white. There's some gray in that. It's a little more complicated.
nuanced.
Yeah, it's a lot of more nuance associated with
And
it.
it's a fight that we keep having, but what goes in and goes out, that's not a revenue. That's not profit that we received.
As long as we don't make a profit on it. Right.
So
But we'll get into
Right, Mr.
details on that through the budget process,
Yeah.
certainly.
Mr. McVoy, let me just keep it, Mr. McVoy,
Well, you let Commissioner Malega talk a number of times without.
I called on her.
No, it was multiple times, but, I would say, I can see all sorts of arguments. I think it needs to be a separate discussion. I think we should probably look at other utilities. I suspect that their fuel cost portion that corresponds to something like PCA is considered part of the overall revenue when they pay their franchise
It gets
fees,
taken off.
the equivalent to ours. Whether investor-owned utilities pay an administrative service one, but so I think that's a bigger discussion. I don't think it has a clear, obvious, it's obviously this or it's obviously that. I think there's quite a bit of room on it. I think the firewall place needs to be the storm fund for the electric is absolutely just for electric. Can't get used, to fix streets or whatever that we need to fund differently. That
Mr.
one I think should be clear.
Mr. Diaz.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with the spirit of that. It's probably not going to be a hard 8% line. There's that support that needs to come from other departments and whatnot. And similarly, it's kind of like, what I brought on before, the policy needs to be written in a way that any commission can't just vote and say, we're going to use this, whatever. I think as long as from day one, we're very clear about how this is used.
Yeah.
And, we're very clear that under these very particular circumstances, changes can be made or it could be transferred to a storm fund. And I think that is a big part of that protection.
How the
for sure.
language is set up.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've been chatting about this for such a long time now. What? Clear as mud. No, I think we have direction that we want to do it. I think and it's consensus today. I'm a little more comfortable with between 3 and 4 rather than 2, keep it a little bit high. With some good guidance. And I think it would be helpful for us to know, in terms of what would the use be? More some ideas for me, what would it, here's what this would be used from. Because what happens better than any of us. So that would be helpful to have for the guidelines, very specific language about when and if and when it can be switched to an emergency storm situation, and the amount. So I think those are the 3 things that we really need to boil down to. And I think we need some guidance from you in terms of how would we use it? And not right now, but just when you come back,
We'll start on
not right now.
So I'd like to say we do it at the next meeting. I think we need a meeting in between because
Yeah.
effectively what happens, the deadline for our next utility meeting is 2 weeks from today. They
Right.
give us 2 weeks from today to come up with these documents. And so let's say it won't be the June meeting, maybe more likely the July meeting or something like that, which will again put us right in the middle of budget season.
Sure.
We'll be having these discussions
Anyway.
contemporaneously anyway.
Yeah. All right. So do you have enough consensus to go forward?
Sounds like we do.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Moving on. New business, Fourth Amendment agreement to the agreement and the work order.
Motion to approve.
Second,
Motion for what? Well, we have public comment.
and we have Brian. Hi, Brian.
Yeah,
I'm approving number 8.
all right, well.
Good evening. I like the motion.
But we have folks that want to talk about it, so we want to give them their chance.
Well, we do. Brian Shields, Water Utility Director, public comment.
I'm sorry,
Was there a public comment card?
I believe there are 2 public comment cards. This is on new business A from Jane Schumacher and Henry Posky. Okay, just one and then the other. You've got 3 minutes. 2 minutes.
only 2.
2 minutes, you're right. I keep getting that messed up.
can give me 3.
No, you're only getting 2. Talk fast.
Hi, my name is Henry Posky. I'm 3160 Lake Osborne Drive, Murray Hills. Those that don't know Murray Hills, we're on Lake Osborne Drive. We're at 518 condos there, a senior community, and it's a beautiful place to live. I'm here. I didn't bring a slide, but I'm here, if I have one, to say thank you to our water utility people. I briefly wanted to say about a year and a half, our commissioner, Sarah Malega, came to our meeting and she brought Brian with her, and we discussed the work that had to be done in Murray Hills. For years, Murray Hills is 55 years old, and for years we've been living with brown water. Well, thanks to all of you, we now have 17 of our 23 condos with fresh, clean water, and we really appreciate it. The last 5 condos that have to be done is probably what you're talking about tonight, because it has to be hired by a contractor. Fortunately, the first 17, you were able to go through the grass and the lawn, but the last 5, you have to cut through concrete, I guess. So I want to give a special thanks again to my commissioner and to all of you who approved the water thing. But I do want to thank Brian Shields, the director of the water utility. And there were some other people with the water utility that I communicated with, and at times quite a bit, to see if we could get it done. And that included Giles Rhodes, who's the assistant director, Judith Love, who's been working closer now with us, and a special thanks to Jesse Barrera, who's the foreman on the job, who brought the crew and did a great job, because after they dug up all these holes and they filled it, they also sodded everything. So thank you to everybody. Thank you, Brian.
Mr. Posky, thank you so much we rarely hear a thank you, and it's very
Okay.
nice to hear. And
Thanks.
just also, I mean, our water utilities director and the whole staff are outstanding, and it's just nice to hear that they have maintaining their level of excellence.
Well, I'm here to represent all 517. The other one is Jane. She's coming up.
Thank you so much. Ms. Schumacher, your name and address, please.
Yes, Jane Schumacher, 3040 Lake Osborne Drive. And again, a resident of Murray Hills, and just wanted to take the opportunity to, again, thank you all for addressing this issue for our community and following through to finish up the hard part of that project as well. And again, just a big thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a lovely area of town. I save Lake Osborne. I get pictures, from the water, beautiful photographs every day on Facebook. And Mr. Shields, thank you so much, and thank your department.
Thank you all for your support.
So now I think we have a motion.
Yep.
Do we have a second?
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimous. Once again, your eloquence is
Thank you.
taken the day. Thank you. Next up is new business B, which is an agreement with the Institutional Technologies LLC for gravity sewer lining phase 1 project.
Motion to approve with one question.
Okay,
I was just curious, you mentioned that it's going to do 10 miles. What's the total mileage ballpark of our?
Well, I knew that question was going to come up, and I asked Julie just before we started, about 100 miles.
wow.
Oh, boy. Darn, I was hoping it was small, but So the
No, but
get us, we've done.
sewer rehab is an ongoing exercise, asset management, and will take place every year from now until eternity.
Might want to budget for it.
Literally,
The end of.
it never
civilization.
ends.
All right. So we have,
Be as a thing.
we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
I,
Passes unanimously. Ms. Malega has gone to speak with her constituents, I think.
Okay, thanks. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Oh, that's it. Thanks.
See you later.
Thanks for being here. Next up is new business C. We have continuing contract for professional services for energy management and engineering services. And here comes our finance director.
Yana Gindahayo, our finance director. These are continuing contracts for professional services with emergency management and engineering services with Power Engineers, Inc. and Kuwait Engineering. So the city in the past previously issued requests for qualification to acquire selected services for the CCNA, which is the Florida Consultants Competitive Negotiation Act. When at that time we received about 60 qualifications from interested firms across all the categories. But for the energy management and engineering services category, we received 11 qualifications. Of those qualifications, we had 8 firms. The evaluation committee shortlisted about 8 firms. And it was recommended that we award a contract to those 8 firms. Back in, we then negotiated rates and terms for each of the recommended firms, and 6 agreements were approved back in March 28th, 2023. So these are the remaining 2 with Power Engineering and Kuwait Engineering Group.
Okay, do I have any questions or a motion?
to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
D, thank you. D, Advanced Metering Infrastructure AMI Opt-out Program. I believe this is Mr. LaRue.
Yes, it is.
Right.
With an assist possibly from council and the rest of my team if needed. So we, as most people know, we have an advanced metering infrastructure, right? AMI remote metering system that uses radio frequency to carry data. We have had a request from one customer, although we do have a number of other customers who would prefer not to have a radio frequency device on their homes. These are for reportedly medical reasons. Not familiar with it, but on occasion, customers may seek an accommodation. What this allows us to do is to remain compliant in the sense that we would allow customers with a valid medical reason, if I understand it correctly from your counsel, that they could opt out of the program. However, there is a cost for us
All right.
for them to opt out because we would not be able to read these meters using radio frequency. We'd have to actually go visit the site
Right.
and get a manual read. It also creates a number of problems for us from an operational point of view. As you heard earlier, we rely on that AMI system to give us information about what's happening from an outage point of view, but it also allows us to really track what's happening for potential theft situations, suddenly step up or step down, what we call a meter blink, which is when somebody removes the meter because they're doing work without a permit, for example.
Never.
And I've heard it happen.
I
on
heard it
occasion.
happen.
But so there's a number of reasons why we have had customers that would prefer not to be on it. That's my understanding that what we need to do is on the occasion where a customer prefer not to have, they have to opt out. And then there's a cost that we incur. Now, some folks seem to have zeroed in on the electric meter as the device. The reality is that our water meter and the electric meter are both on AMI, and there's a radio frequency that communicate device. The water meter communicates the electric meter. The electric meter then has its own information, but both meter reads and hourly data are sent to us, and instantaneous data in the case of outages. So we really have to have both meters. So we'd have to take a look at this and say, should you be able to opt out of one, or can you really have to opt out of both? Because if your concern is radio frequency, you really need to opt out of both. And because we now have to go to the site. It's also not very efficient for us to have to go to a site to read one meter. So if we go back to the old days, which were not that long ago, when we didn't do that, we would we had very specific meter routes
Right.
that were aggregated by area, and they were structured with, I believe, 21 meter read cycles, and the meter readers could actually walk or drive those routes very efficiently. But if you're ping ponging all over the system, it's not very efficient. It's not a very good deal. So we could, or you could suggest that you can't opt out of one, you have to opt out of both. We prefer you not opt out of either.
How many requests have you actually gotten to do this? I mean.
I'm going to use a lifeline for this and ask Tom McKee, who is our manager of utility services, to chat with us about this.
Come on up, Mr. McKee.
And you're live.
Tom McKee, Utility Services Manager. Overall, out of over 27,000 electric meters, I know of less than 10 customers that have posed any interest in this type of program. But we did, look out across the industry, and it does appear to be an industry standard for investor-owned utilities as well as other municipalities to offer a program such as this to give customers that option to be able to opt out if they still feel that would help them in a health type situation.
Do they have to give what kind of reason do they have to give?
So essentially,
I'm looking at our council for that one.
Yes, Madam Mayor, Christy Gowden on behalf of the city of Lake Worth Beach. Because it sometimes involves a reasonable request for accommodation and possibly a disability, we usually don't ask why. The few requests that I know we've gotten, we have inquired further and they've declined to provide further information. And so since Mr. Liberty knew about this at other electric-owned utilities, that he decided maybe we should look into doing this type of program. So it does make it easier from a legal standpoint of when these requests come in to just tell them, yes, we have that program. There's an additional fee you have to pay because now we have to do manual reads and things like that. So for that standpoint, legal does recommend it, but is it 100% necessary? No, the city does have a reasonable accommodation process that would normally go through community sustainability. So we could handle it that way. That's a process that you have to go through, but currently we don't have a rate schedule for this as well.
Right, now let me ask you my next question. I see lights on. Let me just, on the line, we have the two graphs about the costs. Would that be, so if you wanted to opt out of both, you would pay the $80 and the $41? That would be.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Mr. McVoy and then Ms. Malega.
Couple things. I think it's very reasonable to charge people both a upfront cost, because there is a cost of changing things out, and to charge them a monthly cost to do this, because there is a real cost to us, as Director Liberty correctly said. You got to move around the city and read these things individually. Plus, there's all the costs that are much harder to quantify of not having the full information on the system. I think if we implement this program, we should definitely have that when people come and ask for it, have them make sure, maybe even sign something that says, look, if you have an outage, you are not going to be notified yet. If you have a water leak, you are not going to be notified about it, because we won't know about it for a month later. And you acknowledge that you're giving up that privilege that everybody else gets. I would definitely be in favor of making it a all or nothing. You either opt out of both meters or you don't. So I wouldn't split it. I don't know about the 80 and the 40 costs. My guess is those are low, that the real costs of swapping those out are higher than that, and I would make them whatever they are. I also think that the costs of going and reading them are probably underestimated too. So I would certainly make it the total of the 30, 30 plus 30,
Right.
and look and see, are we underestimating there? Is it actually a bit higher? And if people still want to do it. The other thing, this came up when we first brought in the AMI meters, and I was around at that time. I went and talked with a number of the folks that had it. One solution that did come up it wouldn't work with the with the water, but it would work with the electric, was they said, well, how about if you move the electric meter to the back corner of my lot? If we leave that as an option, which I don't have a problem with, but that's quite an expense.
Yeah.
Much bigger, and that needs to be borne by the customer, it seems to me. So those would be my thoughts.
Okay, Ms. Malega and then Mr. Diaz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Those are good thoughts, Vice Mayor. My consideration was that they need to make sure that the property is accessible to be able to be read. And if it's not, then we do an estimate on the round up, not the round down. And then second, I would like to see us look at residents versus non-residents. So the city of Lake Worth Beach versus going to Palm Springs is two different, that if they're not a resident, they should be paying a higher fee in my world. Because now they're making our people leave the city.
I respectfully disagree with that because if somebody has to go from 18th Avenue South to Vernon Heights, that's just about as far as going out to Palm Springs. And our Palm Springs customers do have an issue with tax, like not being represented.
But they're also making it harder for now we have to go to Palm Springs every single month to read their meter. So I just think that this is a case where this is a resident-owned utility, not a Palm Springs owned utility or unincorporated, that I think that the residents should not have to pay as much as other electric utility, because we're going above and beyond the level of service. And again, we have to recoup our costs. This is a business and it does cost fuel and time to go outside of the city limits.
How comfortable are you with these numbers for the charges?
I think we're pretty comfortable. We've had our rates consultants take a look at them and help us arrive at the number. I know we didn't ask Craig to stay on for this portion as well, but he did take a look at these numbers.
Okay, I mean, if we'd approved this, could we ask then for like a review of the numbers to see what that actually would be?
We could certainly look at it periodically as a part of our cost of service study and update our rates accordingly every time we were to update rates through a cost of service study.
Mr. Diaz?
I hear you on that part of it, but I would say it's probably better for liability purposes to word it as like I think Vice Mayor McVoy put it best, what the actual cost is. So if we're driving far, if it's way out of our way, that actual cost should be reflected, wherever they're at on our grid. And then the other thought is, part of the great thing about these readers is you don't have to do the sketchy accessing people's backyards. So do we preemptively have some sort of liability agreement for our readers?
Or make them, but it's mandated, yeah.
Yeah,
It has to be accessible.
Our people, whoever is going to do the reading, I think especially in today's day and age, need to be extra protected in case something happens.
Yeah, so it would have to be accessible.
Mhm.
You want to start, you're comfortable starting out with these numbers?
Yes,
Okay.
Does
And-
this, I'm sorry,
but requiring both to be done, not just one.
Right, Ms. Villeg, I was just gonna ask for, yes, Ms. Villeg?
what is the cost of, but as the Vice Mayor brought up, does this $80 cost, is that what is that our hard cost to swap out and put in this meter and time for staff and all that goes into it? It's an $80.
Yes, and that also includes the new meter as well. We have to begin to inventory and stock new meters that do not have the ability to push out that radio frequency signal. And so this also incorporates that cost. It is difficult to kind of quantify what that cost is because we don't know where in the geographic area the customer is going to live. So we really had to do a time study for the furthest from our office and some of the closest to our office and come up with a good average there, because obviously we're not looking to make money on this. We don't want to punish these individuals that are interested. We just want to absolutely
Get your costs.
the cost.
Yeah.
And you can really send somebody out. I mean, I can't get a plumber to come to the house for $80, much less do anything and swap stuff out. So to me, that 80 and 40 seem still low.
So we actually even incorporated back office administrative functions as far as running those work orders as well. And it came out to those costs. We do change meters pretty quickly. We have to do that essentially every day. So our staff is really efficient at meter change outs, especially on the electric side. The water side, it's a little easier. And the water meters can actually stay we just have to remove a portion, the portion that's sending the signal on the water meter. So it's a little less labor intensive,
Okay.
but there is that possibility that you have to dig out. the
So
gearbox.
if they want to do this, there's just going to be cost involved.
Correct.
So the total, since we're agreeing on it's a 1 or nothing, both water and electric.
Yeah.
Would the monthly cost then be the 60?
No, it's
No,
yeah, 60.
monthly cost, you still have to read both meters, so
Yeah.
that stays the same.
Yeah.
Yes, and the reason that we broke that out is because we have customers that are water only, we have
Right.
customers that are electric only, and both, so that we can
Right.
kind of differentiate depending on what
So
services. we got.
if you have both, you have to do both, the cost is 60 a month. If you only have one because of where you happen to live, 30.
That's correct.
Actually, it's
Okay,
more than
hang on.
60.
But then we need to change the language, because on here, under electric utility, letter C, it says reoccurring monthly service charge for the customer only in an electric meter is 15. And the water is only 20. Together, that's 35.
Yes, I apologize. It would be looked at separately if you were doing both. So there's a small break.
Right,
If
so
you are
it's
doing
only
both, so
$30. It's not
It's
60.
31 time, correct?
No,
Right.
but it'd be, you would take off the 15 monthly and the 20 monthly.
Correct. So it's only $30 one monthly fee for both. It's
Correct.
$30, not 60.
Yes, you would
Correct.
pay the individual initiation fee.
Correct.
both, But the recurring would be just the $30.
So you pay 121 to start and then $30 every month.
That's correct.
$60 every month.
No, you just
30.
changed, it's 30.
Yeah.
30
So
is for both.
recurring monthly service charge per customer enrolled
Oh.
in both an eligible water meter and an electric. So
And that
essentially-
makes sense financially for us, for the city? That,
Still sounds low to me.
it really does, yeah.
Yeah, so in that situation where it's one trip because electric and water meters are on the same, they're.
But do the same
any
people
given
read them?
location. Yes, yep. So
The
it's
same people read them.
The same person that
Okay.
reads both.
Okay.
And it essentially cuts down the trip all the way from the office to that location into you're already at. that
Okay.
location.
Mr. Diaz.
Just to visualize at least on the electric meter, a swap, I mean, knowing how they work, is the box is the same, whether it's a smart meter or not, because you go up, you take the lock off, take the ring off, and it's like a big fuse that you just swap out, right? The water meter, sometimes it's just soldered in, but you can just cut off the communications part, cap the sensor.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. It's essentially just a wire that comes out of the water meter, and then sometimes there's an antenna that sticks out the top. So it's much less labor intensive.
Yeah.
Even though the electric meter isn't overly labor intensive, the water meter is a little bit less.
Yeah, because that part makes sense to me, but I do tend to agree to, if we had 10 customers, I mean, it would take somebody half a day to drive around and read all those.
So, yeah, so it'd be initial 121 with a monthly 30.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
For both, yes.
Okay. Do I have a motion? Do we do a motion?
I would make a motion, but to go up slightly on the monthly charge. Whether it's 20 for the
We
electric.
can only charge what it costs us to do.
I think we've underestimated the
I-
cost, but
I have to say that I agree, which is very rare that I probably agree with you on something like this, but because I just look at the cost of fuel, I go fuel, car insurance, HR, benefits, like I rack all that into my brain. And I'm like, there's no way that doesn't make any sense.
yeah, it seems low to me.
Okay.
Plus,
Yeah.
So I-
you've got, I think what Commissioner Diaz alluded to is the easy one that we all know is dogs used to eat meter readers. Dogs and meter readers didn't get along well. But nowadays, worse things can happen when somebody shows up and there's a liability cost and
Yeah, that's very speculative.
it's not speculative with what's happening around the country.
Okay, I don't know how to respond.
Madam Mayor, maybe what we should do is come back because I believe we're supposed to have a resolution with this and it didn't get uploaded. Because anytime we do a rate, we do by resolution. So perhaps we brought it back by resolution. We could then also include some of the parameters that were discussed in terms of the program of making sure they're clear that they don't have the same notifications they would get if they were on the smart meter, that they have to use both meters if they have both meters. And then also we need to make sure that they're aware of the charges. And so those are clear. Maybe perhaps add that all to the resolution and bring it back for approval.
Property accessibility and waiver of
Right.
Yep.
protecting our
Yeah.
staff.
And preemptively liability release type of thing.
I don't
I don't
know
know
if
if we can do that.
you guys have already come up with an application, but maybe we could attach an application that would then lay out all those things. And by entering the program, they agree to
Initial.
those types of things and a waiver of liability.
Yeah.
Could do that.
I mean-
And then that will drive up the cost. So the actual cost of the program will probably be closer to $100 for an application fee.
Okay, so I think you have direction to come back. All right,
Yeah,
great.
thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to E. Sole source purchase from Transpark for animal deterrent electric fence.
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Sadly, I second.
All in favor? It doesn't kill them, it just shocks them.
I just still, I think a little squirrely.
I don't think it's the squirrels that we're worried about.
Iguana.
Iguanas, I know, I just, it's the whole.
All right, so we have a did we vote? Yes,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next up, is payment of Siemens solar maintenance for fiscal year 22.
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Number G, yeah. Interim annual service agreement for Siemens to maintain solar array. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye, very good. Next is H, which is,
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, that was too quick for me. Who made the motion in the second?
I think it was
McBoy.
Maliga McBoy.
Correct.
Thank you.
M's have it.
Yams have it.
A resolution 17-2023, removing the annual production limitation on individual systems and creating a two-tiered program. Do I have a motion?
I think this
I have some
one,
lights on.
yeah,
Mr. McCoy, what would you like to say?
I think Commissioner Malega was first.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Malega.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. One of the things that I reached out to staff about was cost recovery on this. There is no application fee. And we just had a whole conversation about recouping our cost. And I would like to see us put in an application fee for this. We've gone back and forth. And the other thing that I brought up on this is that in the original language, it did not include business owners. It was all about landowners. So I know that legal and staff has interjected into how we can make some of those changes. Because if I've been a business in town, we have a lot of businesses that have been for 15, 20 years. If I want to put in a solar on my business and my landlord says, go for it, there wasn't any language in here. So I know that legal might have something to add with that, but also the application fee, I think, is imperative on this. Because if somebody can afford to put in a solar field, no, there isn't. No, there's no.
Tier one,
Tier one.
right, yeah, there's no application fee on the existing tier one program.
But there needs to be one on both. And we need to recoup the cost. We've had the internal auditor. You gotta love William. I send him a question and he says, so you ask the internal auditor a question and he will ask you 3 more. And that was his response to me. So I just would like us to look at recouping our costs on everything that we do. We're not here to make money, but at the same time, again, we're resident owned utility. We have to be mindful, and I would like to see us come back with an application fee on that.
Okay, Mr. Boy, I have also some comments, but Mr. Boy, go ahead.
So I will take some responsibility for this one because I proposed it a while back that we consider moving to allowing larger systems and get away from the utility deciding how big the system should be. And so when I was looking at this and I was looking, I kept looking for where's the limitation on how big your system can be? Because I had some concerns that our current system is based on looking at the last 12 months. And there are a number of situations where that doesn't work very well and it will undersize a system for some customers. And that was what my focus was to try and come up with a way. I had not ever, in my mind, intended the idea that we have no limits at all. And in conversations with Director Liberty, very helpful ones, both of us were concerned about the potential, if we have no limits at all on it or no process to review, there is a potential and there's built-in incentives for folks that propose to do solar installation, the contractors and the sellers, to make it bigger than you need.
Right.
And I think I do feel some responsibility as the utility that we try to avoid that problem while still dealing with the issue of if somebody, let's say, an example that's come up that somebody raised with me is they've been longtime snowbirds. So their usage a fair portion of the year is not very big. They decide, okay, time for me to retire full-time to Lake Worth. I want to put in solar. Sizing it on the 12 months doesn't make sense at that point. Other examples that are a little more, maybe more prevalent is I'm anticipating that I'm going to increase my electric usage. I'm anticipating I'm going to buy an electric vehicle. I'm anticipating possibly that my kids get really jealous of my electric vehicle and they want one too. And none of that is reflected in my past usage. So what I think, I'm not totally comfortable with the idea that we leave it wide open. I think we ought to revisit that a bit, and maybe we should move this to revisit in a subsequent meeting with some kind of a program. And I don't know whether it's a hard and fast, well, you can be 125% of your previous usage. That still doesn't address some of those problems that I just raised. Should we have a process where you can negotiate with the electric utility? You bring in your proposal of, hey, here's my past uses, here's what I think it's going to be for XYZ reasons. And the utility looks at it and says, that seems pretty reasonable. Okay. It still preserves the goal of we want to be at about net zero. Maybe we can go 10% higher, maybe we can go 15%, but we don't want to go higher than that. And I think Director Liberty also raised some issues that are to me very valid is as we go to tier 2, I was thinking primarily about homeowners that want to go a bit above 10 kilowatts. Maybe they want to go to 12, maybe they want to go to 15, maybe even some of them to 20, not very many I think is going to want to go that big, but some might. I don't envision any homeowner wanting to go to 100 or that being able to do in with the limitations of the service or the limitations of the drop on it. So I wasn't thinking of the large ones, but there is an issue with the commercial. And there, I think we do need to think about the bigger picture of how do we finance the utility, especially in the context that we are moving to a high amount of utility scale solar. So we are already moving that direction. As everybody knows who's listened to me over the last several years, I'm very much in favor of the more renewable, the better. But I'm also sympathetic to the concerns of how do we finance the utility? How do we finance the transmission and distribution? I think my suggestion would be that we have some more discussions with staff about how do we deal with the really large ones and the concerns about our business model for that. And how do we maybe build in some kind of limitation on the system size for homeowner ones that both protects homeowners and deals with some of our utility concerns. But that would be my suggestion as the person who, and I do want to say thank you to staff for having looked into this and having looked into moving forward. I appreciate that. But I think maybe we need a little more research.
Thank you. One of my concerns was if someone has a system that's quite larger than what they actually need, we are then bound to purchase it back from them. And I don't think that's something that we need to be obligated to do. Mr. Diaz.
Yeah, and application fee I think is a no-brainer. Anything that requires staff time, really, especially a slightly larger system, more permitting, so on and so forth, like that for sure. But I do, when it comes to commercial, I think I agree. This isn't unlimited. Like that would be a bad idea for any municipality. But there is a limit, and then there's the policy limit, but there's also the practical limit. We always talk about the average, roof size of our homes here and whatnot. I think where it gets more challenging, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation, is the commercial side of it. You're going to have much larger buildings, obviously, a lot more potential. So that I think needs to be a separate thing from residential net metering. And yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to that because I think that's going to have a residentially, I think we don't have a lot of houses that are going to really maximize that whole potential. So it's kind of like self-limiting in its own way on top of the fact that it's really expensive to do. But commercially, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities coming up and things like that. So I would definitely look forward to that separate conversation in terms of looking at more of the nuances and like the past 12 months. I mean, I think across the board, that's something to consider because of the way things change. If somebody acquires a new property, they're going to change how they, operate it and whatnot. They'll have a bunch of EVs, whatever it may be. So that flexibility really needs to be in there. And it's the same for commercial. If somebody gets a building or they've been in a building for years, it's been used for storage and has absolutely minimum electricity. And then all of a sudden they say, hey, I'm going to turn it into, I don't know, like a commercial kitchen or something. And it's going to totally double, we need to look at that. And so, yeah, those are all really good thoughts. And
this does differentiate between commercial and residential, correct?
That's correct. There's no difference at all. The rules are the same, whether it's residential or commercial.
Okay.
Are we allowed by state law to differentiate?
Good question.
I don't know the answer to that either.
Madam Mayor,
Yep.
You can differentiate. You just have to have a basis for doing so, somehow rationally related to the reason for it. The state law that requires this program, it doesn't really say much. It just requires you have a program. So how you implement that program is up to you, but it's always recommended to have some kind of rational basis when you set up different classes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Diaz.
Right. And then on that note, the ever popular rational basis test. Thank you, Supreme Court. So, I think the basis of that is when we look at the building or the property on application, if it's a massive warehouse that's going to have a huge change in terms of what it's going to, if they install these solar panels, I think the basis is that's going to be considerable more staff time on us. It's more expense on us. So yeah, I mean, I think those opportunities are there.
And we don't want to have to buy back their electricity. I mean, to me, that's a big deal
We don't want to be burdened
Right.
with
their
exactly.
extra juice. So where are we at now? Do we want to make some changes to this resolution or what do we want to do?
My suggestion would be not to try to change it on the fly.
Right.
Give
That's what I
ourselves
mean,
some
right?
time
Bring it back.
to bring it back. Yeah,
So do we have a motion to table it?
I'm okay. I'm not the expert in tabling with continuance. We have a.
Motion to
attorney who knows.
continue?
Motion.
Well, it would be, you can do a motion to table to a future meeting
Right,
without setting the particular date, because obviously there's some research and whatever that needs to take place.
right,
We already know we couldn't get it on the next meeting because the deadline's in 2 weeks.
right.
So
Okay,
you could just say to a future meeting.
motion to table to a future meeting.
I move to do what the city clerk suggested.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye. All right, so we'll revisit this. Next up is I.
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Passes unanimously. The last one is J, Florida Municipal Power Agency Municipal Solar Project 3 Solar Energy Exchange Agreement.
Motion to approve.
Beat me. Second.
There's so much kumbaya on this side tonight.
We all.
So who did the motion? Who did the second?
Malika McBoyd.
Malega McVoy. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Do I have a motion
To do it.
to adjourn?
Just kidding.
Get it. Get out. A motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye.
Support.
Yes, somebody really. Make that motion. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great evening. It's on 8:06.